Jessica here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm making a layered scene card. I'm achieving the dimension with metal wafer thin dies. The ones I'm using are from Lawn Fawn, Simon Says Stamp and Recollections. For more details on the items used, go to my blog where I link to the products shown in this video for you. Most of the cardstock I'm using is from Paper Tray Ink. Their cardstock is excellent and has a nice heavy weight to it. I'm using my trusty Big Shot to cut out all the pieces that I will need for this card. I don't have a set idea on what I'm making, but I find it's easier to get most of the die cutting out of the way first. I'm stamping the Bigfoot from Lawn Fawn's Lovable Legends stamp set with VersaFine ink. VersaFine is a waterproof ink and is great to use with watercolor pencils. I have the Fantasia Artist 36-piece set. These pencils are inexpensive. I haven't been using them for long and there are some pros and cons to them. I have a swatch sheet that shows the true colors easily, and a few of the colors are very similar and there isn't a whole lot of color payoff. These are great if you're just learning how to use watercolor pencils. I have a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper and I'm defining a cloud pattern for a sky. I'm holding the pencil lightly and sketching it across the paper, leaving blank spots of white that will make up the clouds. It will be faint, but my goal is to add some color and texture to this portion so that it is not blank. This won't be the focus of the card. I'm using a Karatake water brush to blend out the color, which creates the watercolor effect. To get more saturated color, you can take the tip of your water brush right to the pencil lead and blend out. I also used the Tim Holtz watercolor paper to die cut a retro camper trailer from a Recollections die I found at Michael's. I'm using a coral shade of pencil for the top portion of the camper and green shades for the bottom. For the door, tire, and around the window, I'm using a black and gray. First I go in with the light colors, going from one portion to another so that each layer has a bit of time to dry before I go in with a darker color. This die not only cuts out the shape of the camper, but also embosses the details of the window, door, and tire. I'm using the paper towel to dab off the color before switching to another. That way the colors don't mix. And because the paper is wet from the first layer, and I'm not impatient enough to wait for it to dry, I'm adding more color by taking my water brush directly to the tip of the pencil again. If you try to color on already wet paper, it can cause a lot of color to go down and it won't blend. I would like to try another brand of watercolors pencils sometime. I know Prismacolor has a line of them. I think the ones I've heard the most about is the Inktense pencils. Those would be fun to try. Alright, so I have a Bigfoot image that I stamped earlier, and I'm going to do the same kind of coloring on him as I did with the camper. I'm starting off with gray again and adding black as a shading. I'm limiting my colors for this so that it fits the guidelines of the Color Throwdown challenge. I've already done one entry for that challenge, but I've enjoyed the color combo and thought I would try a different style of card for another entry. I will link to the post on this card, on the first card I did, with regular Prismacolor pencils in the description below. And I'll also link to the Color Throwdown challenge if you'd like to join in. Okay, let's go back to the dies we cut out in the beginning of this video. A very easy way to add shading and dimension to die cuts is with distress inks. I have one of the Tim Holtz blending foam tools and I'm adding brushed corduroy to the mountains. First I add the ink to the edges and then blend out to the center. Distress inks are a dye ink and are different from distress oxide inks. Because it is a dye ink, the ink sinks into the paper. Distress oxide inks have a different formula and are more of a pigment ink, more like a paint than a dye. Oxide inks will sit on top of the paper instead of being absorbed by it. I'm also adding Twisted Citron to the tips of the grass on this Lawn Fawn die and Mowed Lawn to Simon Says Stamp Hillside die. If you don't have these inks yet, I highly recommend them. I love the small cube ones because they are easy to store. Because I wasn't sure of my design when I cut these die cuts out, I made them all larger than my A2 size card base. That way I have some leeway and can move them around before committing to an exact design. After deciding on the size I need, I trim the mountains with my tonic paper cutter and add more ink to the edges that I just cut. You could trim the die cuts first and then blend the ink to save a step, but I didn't really plan this out beforehand, just making it up as I go. After that, I then adhere the snow caps to each mountain top with multi-medium matte glue. I like to use these tweezers for adhering smaller items. It just makes it easier. Then I just cut off the bits that are hanging off. Now that the watercolor panel of the sky scene has dried, I can attach the mountains to it. I'm using my ATG gun to adhere the mountains. I know there is quite a gap at the bottom of the panel, but that will be covered up with other die cuts. I line up the hillside die cut and adhere just below the mountains. Now you can see the scene of this card start to form more clearly. There is quite a bit of overhang from this cut, but I trim it off using the card panel as a guide. And using my ATG gun again, I adhere one layer of the grass behind the other so that they are one piece. I'm going to use foam tape to attach the grass cuts to the panel of this card. This foam tape I have is an off-brand and is slightly thicker than the 3M foam tape I'm going to use later. I'm using the thicker foam on the grass because that will be the front layer of this card. I'm using the 3M foam tape on the little Bigfoot guy so that he can sit just behind the grass. I use my tweezers again to help peel off the backing of the tape and press firmly down to attach him. Off video, I die cut the camper image 3 times using Neenah cardstock. I wanted the camper to sit up off the hillside but not be the same height as the Bigfoot. I actually only used 2 of the die cuts to layer behind the colored camper, but it was enough, and this is a great way to add dimension without using foam tape if you don't have any. Then using the gray and black Fantasia watercolor pencils again, I shaded just below the camper image to create a shadow. It just adds more depth. It's always the small details that I like adding onto a card. I think it just gives it a little more pop. I had originally wanted to use the die cut from the camper set, Happy Camper, for the sentiment, but they were just too big for this card. The only place I could put them was in the sky area, and that just looked kind of weird to me. So I brought out the stamp set Lovable Legends again and used one of the great sentiments from that. The cardstock I'm using is a nice coral color that will help tie in the color of the camper. Using my stamp platform, I stamp it with Versamark ink and heat emboss it in white. Then I trim it to fit on the bottom of the card and add a banner into it. All that's left is to attach it to a card base. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Doing those things really does help out YouTube creators. Don't forget to look in the description for the link to my blog, where I list links for Amazon and Simon Says Stamp to all the products I used in today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!